The little check square is a very easy version of color work. It does have stranding. You can see those strands on the back. And it does take 2 colors. So I'm going to use iCat and Boho for this little checks square this month. Now, I know that in the pattern, I'm telling you to use color 500 Milk and color 506 French, but as we've already established, you can really use whatever colors you want at this point. Just remember that you do want some contrast between your background color and your pop color. So when you get ready to knit your square, just make certain that you have 2 colors that don't blend too much together and you can still see the contrast between them. In looking at our pattern, it says that we are going to cast on 34 with color 500 Milk, but I'm actually going to use the Boho, and then I'm going to use the iCat as my contrasting color. And I'm going to follow that chart and repeat the stitches between the red lines, or these stars, 8 times, and then repeat the chart 4.5 times. And the reason that we do that extra half time is so the top and the bottom match. But remember, you're just knitting until your square is roughly 6 inches on each side. So if you need to bind off a little early or add a little more to your square, it will look fine in your blanket. So don't panic or stress about that. I'm going to go ahead and cast on and start to work that first and second row so that I can show you what to do. So I'll see you in just a bit. So I've worked just that very first row, which was a knit row, and now I'm ready to start on the wrong side, and we're going to slip that first stitch and knit one in the background color, and then we're going to use that contrast color and we'll purl 2 stitches there. So it will end up looking like this, but on the back side you'll see those floats as they move along, the smaller floats and the larger floats. So I'm just going to grab my background yarn and slip that first stitch, purl the next stitch, and then it's time to place my contrast yarn in, and I'm going to go ahead and leave a little bit of a tail so that I can weave that in later. I'm going to just hold that down a bit. First stitch is always the trickiest. Then just go ahead and purl and purl. Now at this point you have options. You can hold both colors together if you happen to be a continental picker, and you can just pick your color, and that will help you to keep your floats soft and loose, because that's very important for this pattern, is that you keep those floats. You can see right here, here's a float and here's a float, soft and loose, because you want to make certain that you aren't pulling the fabric in. So you can hold both of them in your left hand. You can also, if you want to, hold one yarn in your left hand and treat the other one as a thrown yarn, like in English knitting. And if that's more comfortable for you, feel free to go ahead and do that. Or you can switch back and forth between your colors. This is a really good time to practice your color work knitting and make certain that you are remembering to keep all of your floats traveling in the same direction, and that you are always keeping one yarn above the other. So here you can see it doesn't look quite as tidy because I've moved the placement of the yarn up and down and up and down. So I don't always keep my purple underneath or my blue underneath, and that can affect your overall quality of your knitting and the appearance of your knitting. So you just need to make certain that whatever you choose to do, that you're very consistent and that you always carry the purple underneath or the purple on top, that you just choose a color. And you'll actually see some color dominance as well. You may find that if you've knit the first few rows and you don't really like how it's looking, you feel as though your contrast color is being lost in the background, then what you might try doing is switching the placement of those yarns and carrying the opposite yarn on top, because you'll find that carrying those yarns kind of pulls them together, and it can either make the yarn pop or it can make them look very hidden within the fabric. And so that's just something to keep in mind as you are working the color work patterning of your little square for the little checks. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this row and go ahead and do the full repeat, because I think you have the idea of the floats on the back. Remember to keep them nice and loose. And then I will come back and show you what it looks like. So now that I have worked through that first repeat, those 8 rows of the little checks pattern, you can really see those checks are emerging, those nice little iCat squares inside of the boho background. And you can also see those floats along the back. Now you can choose to do a couple of things along the edge. I have chosen to just keep running the yarn back and forth on the rows where it's worked, but you can also wrap that blue yarn around the row at the end and kind of work your colors in along the side. I don't find that necessary for this blanket, but it's something to keep in mind for larger color work pieces that you might do. But I really like the way that this is coming out. You can see my floats are nice and loose on the back, so my pattern is nice and clean on the front. So I'm going to go ahead and look at our next square. So why don't you grab your knitting needles, grab your yarn, and let's take a look at the stripes.